gremlins may be in our future, but we'll remain calm.
Sometimes it is. I don't get as amped up during those technological failures in the middle of something like I did when I first started doing this, because I've found that it compounds a problem if I'm sitting there having an anxiety attack at the same time.
Yeah.
I just walk through it. I'm like, okay, that didn't open. All right.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
All right. We'll get to it here in just a second. All right. There it is. But I'm speaking to somebody that has a lot of familiarity with TV and recording and productions and that kind of thing here. We have Steve Young, multifaceted creative comedy writer, musician, and filmmaker. You did Letterman for how many years?
25.
25 years.
Yeah.
You worked with The Simpsons as well.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit. And then Bathtubs Over Broadway. I'm a fan.
Okay, that's fun. We can chat about that. I'm the main subject of that film. That's a documentary made by filmmaker David Letterman about my going down the rabbit hole into a very unusual, secret, shadowy corner of show business.
Awesome. Well, Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from, and then we'll kind of go from there.
All right. Well, I'm a Yankee. I don't know if that's a problem for you.
I'm in Florida. There are people that say things like that. I could care less.
All right, good. I think we'll get along fine. Grew up in semi-suburban, semi-rural Massachusetts. I thought fairly early on I might want to be a writer, but I didn't really know what that would entail. I thought, maybe I'm the next Stephen King. Turned out I had comedy. It didn't occur to me for quite a while that could be a branch of writing can actually make a career, but
they don't tell you that in school.
They might now. I mean,
they may now, but they didn't when we were in school.
No,
there was no teacher that was going to tell me that I could write about ridiculous stuff in her class, because it would have never worked out in her favor.
Yeah, the landscape, kids coming up today are in such a media saturated world. They're very aware that probably they don't care about TV anymore. They all want to be influencers and on TikTok and all these things that I have to talk about like a grumpy old man. But in my early years, why do they Google? Don't Google everything. No, when I was a kid, I didn't really understand that TV shows had writers. I might have dimly seen credits go by. But even when first time I watched David Letterman in the early 80s, I didn't really have a sense that this could be a professional goal to be affiliated with a show like this. It was only much later, coming out of college, and I started to understand, funny people can try to get on Saturday Night Live or the Letterman Show as writers and make a go of having a career. And I thought, wow, I think partly since I have no other prospects, maybe that's what I should go for. So I got very lucky, and eventually it didn't happen overnight. I was a bartender up in Boston for a while, scrambling around. But eventually I got my foot in the door on TV and had this crazy long run at Letterman. You're not going to have people working 25 years at a show.
No, I couldn't imagine that's very common at all.
Even back when I was doing it, it was pretty rare to have a show that would run for 20 or 30 years. And a lot of TV jobs are very temporary. You work for 6 weeks here or a season there or whatever. The Letterman Show and a few others were quite unusual in that people would settle in for the long haul if they were well suited to it and liked the show and what it did and felt like they'd become part of a family. It's a nice way to go about having a creative life if you can get it, but it's going to be very rare now.
I think I'm inclined to agree with you, and that really does explain a lot to me in the years of consuming Letterman and loving all of the bits and the inside jokes and the, dudes reading scripts from Oprah. And like, that is probably one of my favorite bits ever, is when those two guys were reading Oprah.
So simple. So
it is
primal and simple, and just the mismatch of these characters and
Perfect.
the visuals and the voices with what's
The cigarettes, the
Yeah.
whole nine.
Oh yeah, Kenny Sheehan got very good at smoking a cigarette, so this enormous long ash would bang all the little grace notes like
True
that.
story. I worked at a Captain D's, and the guy that worked the prep cook in the morning, he had like, spiderweb tattoos all over his hands. He was making coleslaw with a plastic glove. I don't know what the glove was going to serve because he had a cigarette in his mouth with about a 4-inch ash over the tub of coleslaw. He's just stirring. I heard it. And he just kept stirring. I said,
Okay,
I'm
well,
never eating coleslaw again.
I was going to say a little extra fiber. No, I think the coleslaw
I
has
don't even
plenty
know
of
what
fiber. I don't know, minerals. I'm trying to find
Dust.
a good way to look at this, Jay. I don't.
There's no good way to look at it. Just don't eat coleslaw again because it just made me suspicious.
Okay.
That said,
Pro tip.
I believe in authenticity and creativity go hand in hand, right? And I think that we always get this lightning in a bottle thing, right? Where it's like you have a creator that shows up in whatever form they are, from musician to actor to, painter, whatever it is. They show up on the scene with what? Their untainted art. That's how they were discovered, because they were putting in the time in advance. They're crushing it. They're crushing it. Everybody loves them. Now repeat. Repeat is not your game, right? That's somebody else's. That's monetization of a talent. And it's not necessarily the same quality over time. Especially, you can't paint a picture well if you're looking over your shoulder for approval, right? So I like the fact that a show like Letterman gave you guys an authentic playground, because you don't get bits like that or long-term people if you're not giving them the ability to be themselves at all times. And I absolutely love that. And knowing that that was the environment behind there, hearing family, makes me super happy, because every time you watch David Letterman smile or laugh, it was real. There was no fake laugh. So he was enjoying whatever you guys were putting on paper and back and forth. So that's my thank you and geek out at the same time.
All right, I appreciate that. Being a writer for a show like that is an interesting set of challenges. On the one hand, you have to master or be reasonably good at what is the host's voice, what do they like. But you can't just keep giving the host what they've already seen. You have to find the way to shove the window open a little wider somewhere with a sensibility that they would like if they had ever seen it. And you can hopefully bring them little wisps of something that's exactly the sort of thing I love, and yet somehow we've never seen this before until this writer came. So that was the target to try to hit. Very different.
Oh, that's each individual has their own seasoning that they bring to the table. And if you're telling them they have to be salt when they're actually garlic, you're not going to get what you want. Let them be garlic and you'll be able to season it correctly. Salt is salt, garlic's garlic. Don't try to make one be the other, right?
I've heard of garlic salt. Is that a problem?
Well, that's combined.
Oh.
I think that's me and my wife. She's Italian and I'm white as all hell. So my newborn son, Nolan, is garlic salt.
Okay. Congratulations on the arrival of garlic salt.
Garlic salt. I'm going to start calling him that.
Okay. You'll love it.
Well, that's our household, though. You brought up finding a voice for your host and getting challenges in front of them. And one of the things that we're going to talk about today is bathtubs over Broadway. But that is born of something from Letterman early on, correct?
Yes. When I showed up at the 14th floor of the NBC building in 1990, the head writer, a terrific guy named Steve O'Donnell, who I'm still friends with, took me down the hall on my very first day to say, we need to find you an office. And there were several empty offices. There had been some turnover on the writing staff. He brought me into an office and said, how about this? All right, perfectly fine office. There's a desk, there's the chair, but what are all these boxes of vinyl records? And he said, well, we do a bit on the show, a found comedy bit called Dave's Record Collection. And hey, maybe you'll be the new guy to do Dave's Record Collection. The writer who used to have this office has moved on, but he was the record collection guy. Maybe that'll be your bit now. So within 20 minutes of my arrival at the show on my first day, a little bit of destiny was set in motion because
serendipitous.
I gathered the raw material for Dave's record collection, which we do a couple times a year. This involved me going out to used record stores, thrift shops around New York City, just looking for any real, unintentionally funny record album that Letterman could hold up. We'd hear a little sample of what was bizarre about it. He'd have a clever quip. It's a good, strong, solid framework for a piece. But I was finding, the gold standard, which we ran through quite early, was the singing celebrities who shouldn't have been singing. Like William Shatner was a classic
Rocket
repeat
Man.
offender. Yeah, that sort of.
It's the best ever.
Then we'd get these bizarre instructional records, which were perfectly reasonable within their context. But if you have learn how to touch type and you hold up the record album and Dave says, let's hear a sample, and you just hear a voice saying Q, 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 R, R. So, I mean, that is so weird out of context. So
Would
we
he
had fun
know
with
in advance that you were going to what record it was, or did you guys take that away from him at any point so that you could really catch him off guard?
Oh, no. He wanted to be involved in selecting which of the offered records or any other kind of joke. He wanted to be absolutely sure that this was stuff he liked and could get behind and could sell. So he would have heard everything before. And we'd pitch him the jokes and he'd, no, maybe, okay, yes, that joke, that record, okay. So he was all over the details of that. But I began finding the occasional specimen of something so strange I couldn't wrap my head around it. Souvenir, private pressing vinyl records from company sales meetings and conventions like in the 50s, 60s, 70s that were
Welcome
musicals.
to Hoover.
Well,
we're going to tell you about the world of vacuums.
Oh, and the people in the audience, they already knew about the world of vacuums. They were the salesmen and distributors. And these records were musicals, musical theater, custom crafted for this private corporate audience. So you would have a musical about the challenges but glories of being a Massey Ferguson tractor dealer, or a whole musical about, well, it's going to be a great sales year for Ked's sneakers. 1, 2, 3, hit it. And then you get like rah-rah songs full of data and specifications, oftentimes about the new sneakers and what all the points of those are going to be, in the new transmission and the tractors and light bulbs and nuclear power plants and Pepsi Cola, everything. So I found this secret world of show business, and I had no idea how this would spiral up into something vast, not just my collecting over time, but the people I would meet. Because after a while, I want to track down the people who wrote this Detroit diesel engine musical and say,
what were they? Where were they at the juncture in their life when John Deere Ballet got put together? Like, that's got to be an interesting conversation. But I'm no expert in just about anything. But if I were to put the word propaganda on something, I feel like this is like corporate propaganda to their own employees, like hype material.
It is that, but it's more complicated than that. People in these audiences, or Plymouth salesmen, or General Electric appliance dealers, they want to believe that they've made a good choice by joining this company, and they can get their slice 100%. Of the American dream by selling. And let's cross our fingers that the new 1960 Cadillac is going to be a winner that we'll love to sell and we'll be proud to sell, and that we'll all do well together, and America will do well. And some of these shows could also be self-aware enough to have songs and comedy bits about, we know we screwed up last year. We're going to own it. We're going to admit it humorously, but honestly, and that will give us a reset. You guys can believe in us again because we're telling the truth, and we know things are going to be better. We're going to have to prove it to you with better products, better marketing, but we're going and you're coming with us and it's going to be better. So there was a certain amount of management consulting skills that went into how do we talk to our own people about what's been going on and how they can believe us when we tell them it's going to be a great year. So this turned into a vast investigation for me, not just people, but American history and the psychology of organizations, musical theater, which I knew nothing about. I was learning about Broadway shows backwards and upside down because I was finding some of these things were song parodies of famous Broadway show tunes that I didn't know. And so I would learn much later, oh, that's actually not an original Chrysler
that happens
Plymouth
with
song.
me with samples and rap.
Okay.
Like, I'm like, oh, that was that song?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm like, I didn't realize that.
So David Letterman, who's a brilliant filmmaker, she was an editor at the Letterman Show when I first met her. She decided at one point, I guess I'd had a book that I'd done with my friend Sport Murphy about these industrial musicals. And she said, I think there's a lot more to investigate here. And so she made Bathtubs Over Broadway, which is an enormous undertaking for about 4 years. That's how long some of these documentary projects can take when you don't have much money and you're scrambling to find funding and partners and all that. But Dave Letterman signed on as an executive producer, helped us get going. He's in the movie. Yeah, I'm one of the few people who's ever gotten to interview him. And we were the only production ever to shoot in the theater and backstage and at the offices, which is a fascinating time capsule now, coming up on 10 years since that was all shot. But for anyone who loves the Letterman Show, that's a fascinating separate angle. But the movie is deeply hilarious, but also profoundly touching and heartwarming because we get past the kitsch of the wacky musicals and then we go into who were these people, where were they in their lives, how did they feel about doing the best work of their creative careers, about a lawnmower for a musical that was going to be heard once at 8 a.m. in Kansas City. And
some opera singer that's classically trained screaming about pistons.
Yes, it's exactly that. And I love that this is so off the charts absurd, yet sometimes the melodies are very powerfully haunting because they were hiring A-list people to write this stuff, loaded with the most improbable lyrics you've ever heard in your life and sent into the stratosphere by absolutely genius performers. I thought, this is the most combustible mixture of crazy and beautiful I've ever heard. And it's funnier than any comedy because it's real and it's almost completely unknown. There were only a few record collectors who'd ever noticed that this was a genre.
Yeah, you got into a battle with somebody out there for a little while that kept snaking all your records in advance, right?
Well, that was the eBay battle days with my my friend and eventual collaborator Sport Murphy, who was interested in these. Oh, the 1963 Xerox musical about the introduction of the 813. What? Outbid? Who? Why? And it was me. It was always me.
Possible.
Yes. So he eventually tracked me down, and we signed a peace treaty, and he's the co-author of the book. But yes, people I met who are not only the writers, performers, directors, choreographers, but fellow collectors. I'm hanging out with Jello Biafra, who I wouldn't know in any universe except through this tiny, weird, intense record collecting connection.
That's insane. It really is. You don't know where life is going to lead you and whose doorstep you're going to end up on. If you had told me 5 years ago, I started this show, and at one point, which Gary's still around, he's part of it, that I'd be working with the former executive producer of The Ultimate Fighter for 20 seasons and standing in, the apex watching the season finale with Conor McGregor, screaming inside of a quiet gym with only like 25 people. So surreal. But in the beginning, or back in the day, I had a lot of mental health problems that I was going through. And that show was just, it had such a strong pull for the little guy, or heart recognizes heart. And you'd watch these stories and it really resonated with me. I didn't know why, like small things, camera work. I wouldn't even know to ever pay attention to this on any other show. And then fast forward, here I am sitting in front of Gary, and we end up becoming like best friends, and that show was so impactful to me then. And then, you end up crossing that bridge later. There it is. Right. But I think that all happens for a reason. If you're running the course the way that feels authentic, it's pinball. Right.
Yeah.
But it's fun.
I've spent the past 10 years going zigzagging all over the pinball game of life here. Similar to you, if you told me 10 years ago some of the things that could have happened, like the man who wrote the music for the Detroit diesel engine musical Diesel Dazzle, and also worked on the legendary 1973 General Electric Silicone Products Department show, Got to Investigate Silicones. If you would tell me 10 years ago even, you're going to be writing songs with this man that are going to be in this powerful documentary movie, I would have thought that is beauty and improbability turned up to 11. But let me at it.
I wholeheartedly support this way of approaching life. I did not start out this way. I started out modeling myself after what I was told would make me happy.
Yeah.
Grew up poor. So happiness is inside of the suburbs. That's where you need to get some college degrees, do that thing. But in all honesty, happiness is in being yourself, pursuing your passion, no matter what it is. And if it doesn't evolve, then you're probably repeating somebody else's work for money, right? Because if you aren't actually pursuing your passions, it wouldn't be on repeat, right? That's a mental illness.
I've been obviously very lucky in many ways. For 25 years, my day job was what some people would have considered the ultimate pinnacle to hope for in a comedy world or a creative world. And yet, after a while, as much as I appreciated it, and even to the end, I was really enjoying writing bits and amusing Mr. Letterman and having a good time there. I felt like, what else is there for me? And this record collecting that spiraled up into this phenomenon with this documentary and now live shows that I do, that grew out of the day job, but far transcended what my life was like at the day job. And there was a lot of repetitive days at the Letterman Show. The details were all different about what's the bit today and what are the jokes, but it was very predictable. And I spent so long, I've referred to it as being an indoor cat. And then since the Letterman Show ended, I am very much an outdoor cat, and I'm going places and meeting people as much as I can and trying new things and seeing, am I a songwriter? Apparently I am. And am I an artist? That's a loaded term. To call yourself an artist is already an act of faith and ego. But to say, well, I'm not an artist, that's a problem also. So
it is a problem also.
Yeah. So I'm just trying out all
creativity.
I'm reading a book called Art and Fear, which talks about things like, are you afraid to call yourself an artist because you feel like, well, you're no Picasso. How can you be an artist? You're no
like an imposter syndrome type of thing.
I don't think you're Shakespeare or the Beatles. You're nothing then, and that's not the way to think about it, because most people have
this is
impulses.
My Jiminy Cricket with like a bottle of bourbon in his right. And that's what my guy sounds like. Everybody else has got like, somebody cheering him on. I got drunk Jiminy Cricket telling me I suck all the time. This is speaking to me because I find that bridge to authenticity is really, or the cliff that is being authentic ends up being a curb. That's it. To be yourself is simply just one step off, but we are so terrified of failure and what other people will think that we will stand there thinking we're going to fall 1,000,000 miles to death when it's really like, I just dropped baggage.
Yeah, I don't know if it's age or wisdom that accumulates that gets you past that. I would like to say this is the first time I've ever heard of insects, and specifically crickets, enjoying bourbon. But I'm all for it. I think they probably need a little bit of that in their lives. It's hard to trick
Jiminy
it.
Crick was constantly trying to make people do the right thing and they weren't listening to him. I feel like he did have to have some kind of problem at home to get over the fact that people were just not listening.
And I always go down the wrong path. And that's actually served me well in my whole career as a comedy writer, just thinking, where do you get tiny coat and hat? Is there a store for insects?
Oh, man.
And he goes in and, I don't know. That's not really, I'm sick of looking at coats. That one's fine, I guess. And then that's what he just wears.
This is what my brain does. It's exactly like this. It does this whole cutaway land where I end up outside of the confines of whatever it is we were talking about. And I'm doing exactly that. I'm hunting it down. Like, I think we were talking about magicians the other day, and I immediately went to the curmudgeon magician that has like the hole in the top of his hat and the rabbit's just sitting there smoking a cigarette and they're both pissed out behind the casino. Just because, you know, the old stereotype magician there.
Yeah, I love those juxtapositions of the character we all think we know, and it's successful or glamorous or beloved or whatever, and then the subterranean level where it's mundane and difficult, and they're just dealing with the same bullshit that everyone else is. Like a cricket saying, I really got to get this little jacket dry cleaned. It's filthy, but I don't have time. I have to go off.
For a kid with a big nose? For a fucking kid with a big nose. Puppet.
Why does this have to be my problem? Who set me on this path?
What kind of name is Geppetto?
Yeah, I do want to talk to them. I'm really interested in collage work. Why can't I be a cricket that does collage work? Which circles us back to the, are you an artist and should you be an artist and all that. So the last 10 years post Letterman, I've been trying a lot of things, and being in the documentary has, in that pinball game way, led to so many other things with people I would never would have known otherwise, things I never would have tried.
I'm doing voice acting now, voiceover work. I would have never done any of those things. However, I was talking to my wife the other day, completely forgot about it. But about 20 years ago, I was living in Japan, and I had a student, because you teach English on the side while you're there, because it's good money. It's conversational. They come over, they sit with you. You end up feeling guilty after a little while and just not charging them, which is what I did. So I'm like, I can't just sit here and talk to you about your kids and family and work and then ask you to hand me $100 when we're done. But I had a Sony executive that was coming to see me. And one day he showed up with a mini recorder. And I'm going to find this and put it, with the show, or later on I'll release it. But he kept telling me all the time, he'd be like, oh, your voice is amazing. Your voice is amazing. I'm like, what are you talking about? This is weird. I didn't get what he was talking about, in the manner that he meant for the longest time. And he shows up with a recorder one day and he's like, can I borrow your voice? I'm like, borrow my voice? What does that mean? He's like, I have a convention coming up and a commercial, and you have the perfect voice. And he pulls out this mini recorder. He's like, say this. And I said, solutions for innovating tomorrow. And he came back later and gave me the commercial on a DVD, and I didn't even know about it and didn't get paid.
Oh my God, you're the solutions for innovating tomorrow guy?
I am, right? But it's funny, like, I didn't think about it after that ever again. It was just this cool, funny thing that happened in my life. And now I have, a booth, and I'm standing here screaming like an idiot on a microphone. It's funny how life will take you full circle in certain areas.
Absolutely. And good on you for making a go of doing some voiceover work and getting paid. I've been told sometimes, oh, you have such a good voice. Do you do VO work? And I said, I knew the heavy hitters from the voiceover world when they would come into the Letterman Show and do bits. And they all said, it's a very tough business in the past 20 years or so. They said, I wouldn't advise putting too many eggs in the basket of making that a paying career. But if you've managed to crack the code, good for you.
It's working. There's so many more areas that you have to become a voice artist within. 20 years ago, they probably didn't have massive augmented reality video games that required complete families and backstories and voices for every single character in it.
Yeah.
And that's just one game. And two, then anime, then animation. There's so many more now. I think with the additional media outlets or the internet, there is a lot of work. It's just you've got to know how to find it, how to get it, and putting yourself in front of the right people.
Okay, well, I may have to have a separate conversation with you about that because maybe I would be good at it. I don't know. It's the right place at the right time sort of situation if it happens to work out. But yes, okay. So this is rapidly turning into a job interview. So I need to.
See, this is what we're supposed to talk about: our passions, what it is that we love doing. I preach on the show that if you're not being 100% yourself, it's a slap in the face of whomever or whatever made you. Right? To think that you can do it better than this machine is pretty fucking arrogant. It's kind of like catching your breath. Bullshit, it was going to happen.
Better than this machine, meaning like an AI voice?
No, I mean better than this bio-engineered body that I have. I'm not going to do things better than whatever created me, right? But all I can do is be 100% me.
Right. If you can figure out what that is, that's a decades-long project, and we're all just fumbling through the fog, figuring out what is my uniquely useful or helpful or fun thing to bring to the table.
Well, let's talk about the pinball.
Yeah.
Right? You said over the last 10 years, that ball has been all over the place, right? Give me the oddest out of the way one that you have. What one would nobody expect that doesn't belong in this lineup at all? That ended up becoming something that was worthwhile or helped you on this path?
I think probably the biggest surprise for me was, all right, so Bathtubs Over Broadway goes on to the film festival circuit in 2018, and it's a great roaring success. Director David was winning prizes all over the place. We go down to Nashville for the Nashville Film Festival, and I thought ahead and I said, oh, Nashville, that's Music City. You know, now that I'm starting to get interested in songwriting, I should look into this and how it works. Maybe I'll go knock on some doors and say, oh, I write funny songs. And 20 minutes of a Google proved to me that this is going to be a fool's errand. It takes years to cultivate the relationships to get into the right collaborative places with people who are very protective of who they work with and what kind of saleable commercial product they work on. And a guy who writes some sort of snarky, witty little songs with his guitar in his living room, that's not anybody's business model. So I did not knock on any doors in Nashville, except I met a guy there who came to one of the events. He already had heard of who I was. He was interested in the industrial musical stuff, but his name's John Shane. He's a financial professional by day, but in his off hours, he has a very funny country music persona named Merle Hazzard. Just sort of a pun. It's Merle Haggard, but it's also moral hazard, which is an economic term. So he has a bunch of very funny, well-produced songs.
So stupid. It's fantastic.
It is.
I bought my son a book the other day because there was a character in it when I opened up the first page named Jim Pansy.
Okay. All right. Well,
I was like, I'm buying it.
There's your marketing hook.
It was right there. I was like, Jim Pansy.
All right. Yeah. Got to bring Jim Pansy home. So I'm talking to John and I'm saying, yeah, I'm starting to write songs. I had done some little jingles and bits at the Letterman Show in the last couple of years. There were some original songs in the documentary that I worked on. So I had kind of a taste for it. And I was telling him, yeah, I'm starting to write songs. He said, oh, I'd like to see some of your stuff. And he very kindly listened to some of my very crude demos or looked at my lyrics and said, this is pretty good, actually. Not only should you keep doing this, I think we need to start thinking about how you can have a recording session with like serious Nashville session people and studio musicians and real production value. He led the charge on this album that I put out
Yeah,
And
please tell everybody the title of the album.
yes, Broken Heart Insurance is the name of the album. It's I guess an EP. CD Baby, when I was putting it out not too long ago, says anything with more than one track is an album. So, okay, so I have an album, but it's 6 songs, and they were produced in Nashville. Most of them were produced by a Grammy-winning musician, producer.
So well.
Yes.
That was the first thing when I played the music. I was like, because I have nice monitors here, and I'm expecting to hear something decent. It was mixed amazingly. I was like, son of a. And then when I heard the lyrics, I was like, the juxtaposition in those situations are always amazing. When something so ridiculous is being said so professionally and clean, it really throws people off. It made me laugh hysterically right out the gate. I was like, oh, this is perfect.
Oh, I'm so delighted to hear that. Yeah, I think we'll have to call it alt country because it is too weird. As beautifully produced as it is, it's not going to be on your mainstream country music radio stations. Not anytime soon. We'll have to have a long ramping up to that. But yes, that to me, I think encapsulates the strangest, most surprising pinball of the last 10 years, that a series of this happened and then that happened. Then I went there and met that person. And suddenly once I was already pretty much 50 years old was when I started thinking about songwriting. To have that completed batch of songs done at such a high level, it makes me sound legitimate. It just, I could not have imagined.
You are an artist.
There you go. That's right. I got to own it. Yes, I'm an artist.
Everybody does. Once you make the decision to pursue your passion, you are that. Live that, embody that. The day I started podcasting, I was a podcaster.
Yes, you were. And people hesitate to call themselves writers or filmmakers, and you got to get past that. Self-deprecation can be charming up to a point, but if it cripples you and holds you back from actually proceeding, you've got to get past that. But I would also say, yes, I'm an artist, or I'm a writer or a songwriter or whatever, but as is so often the case, and I know you were talking about Gary, you're not going to get that far by yourself. There are going to be people who recognize something in you that they like and want to help, and you got to find yourself with these people. Dava Whisenant, the director of Bathtubs Over Broadway, she thought I had a compelling story in what I'd found and the people I'd talked to, but we found, even after that movie was over, what else can we do? We've been through a battle together. We're battle tested now. We've made a couple of short films, just low budget, but extremely fun and satisfying. And they've been around on the film festival circuit. And then other people I've met, a guy named Mark Kiefer, who I met at a film festival several years ago. He and I have now collaborated on a short film. The music, the prime example of, I couldn't have even imagined how to do that, let alone really doing it myself. I can't go down to Nashville, and I should not be allowed to pick up a guitar within the city limits of Nashville.
Isn't that such a self-limiting statement?
Yeah,
that you would never tell your children, you would never tell a friend, you would never tell anybody, but for some reason we'll unleash that shit on ourselves. I don't deserve it. I don't know why it is that we always feel like someone's going to call us out.
Mm-hmm.
But if it takes some self-awareness and situational awareness to realize it's a standoff. Everybody has the same question in the back of their mind. Nobody remembers what anybody else wore yesterday. They just remember what they picked out, right?
And they remember, if they don't remember what someone else wore yesterday, they remember how that person made them feel yesterday.
That's a amazing statement.
And I'm trying to avoid too much self-deprecation, as we're saying, because it can hinder you. I was just saying, I know my moderate amateur musician skills, and they get better over time with practice and persistence. They definitely get better. But you also say, I should not be the lead guitar player on my album, because
that's self-awareness as far as I'm concerned.
There are geniuses walking the streets of Nashville and everywhere else, but to have the opportunity for true geniuses to throw a little of the fairy dust on
Yeah.
your album.
Tommy Lee is not going to take someone's saxophone and try to do, well, he might actually try to do that.
Yeah,
but,
that never goes well.
It's not his time. It's not his instrument. Everybody has their own instrument, whatever it is, whether it's math, painting, or an actual instrument. Everybody has it. They may have several, right? And our job is to exploit them. Don't leave potential on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Potential on the table when you die has got to be one of the shittiest things to look back at.
Yeah, that's in the back of my mind now. I hope I live for many long, productive decades still to come, but it's no guarantee. And I want to try to get films and songs and art and writing out when I still have all my arms, legs, and eyes and ears working. So, but those geniuses in Nashville, world-class pedal steel or guitar or banjo or whatever, they may not necessarily be songwriters. They need someone else to come in with the material that they can apply their genius to. So again,
it's not just one. It's a collective effort. Our art is so much more beautiful when we allow ourselves to all independently create on the same canvas. I said it before. I was like, you can stand there and try to fight what colors you have or use colors that other people will love you for in your mind. But if your color was black, you should be painting black every single day, because I'll be damned when you step back and have done what you're supposed to do and everybody else, you'll realize that you were the pupil of the Mona Lisa. But had you been painting with the wrong colors, you would have fucked it up. Right?
Yes, we must figure out what we want to say and what is the sound or color or character of whatever our vocal or our artist's styles are. This book I was reading, Art and Fear, about how you must keep making art even if you're never going to become famous or beloved for it, because each piece you do teaches you a little more about what you like to do, what you're good at, how to handle the materials that you've chosen, and you will evolve and get better. Any particular piece you do may be forgettable, but it's part of a long upward climb towards whatever you're really supposed to be doing with whatever talent you're.
Art should be made regardless of whether an audience would see it or not.
That's right. And I always thought with the weird industrial musical records, I hope someday other people will hear this stuff and agree that it's bizarre, but often fantastic. But if they don't, if it's really just me and three other collectors giggling over it and marveling over it, that's okay too.
I feel like Seth MacFarlane would love this. Like, I feel like that would be a documentary that he would fall in love with, because he's into all the most bizarre juxtapositions.
Well,
I can see him having a field day with that.
Let's get Jiminy Cricket to go over there and talk to him about it. We need to give Jiminy Cricket some new gigs.
It's not Jiminy, it's Jominy. We don't want to get sued.
Oh, all right. No intellectual property theft here. No, Jominy Cricket. Completely different cricket.
In cartoons, they can kind of, what is it, parody law or something like that?
Yeah, there are somewhat fuzzy edges to some of those fair use for parody and satire laws, and occasionally there's a big blow up with some court case. And there's also fair use in, like, documentaries. Can you use a snippet of a song if it's illustrating some point? I'm not an expert in that. I just know from having been at the edge of a very complicated, beautiful documentary that there's a lot you have to know about legally as well as just what you're trying to do artistically.
I had no clue until I started working in this arena how much that actually exists. It can be very constraining, it can be limiting, and you don't know what filter you're being brought through that's going to unintentionally be used against you. Like, we lost our TikTok. We had to restart our TikTok because we were having conversations about mental health. Mental health red flags over and over with AI. They permanently banned us. So we had to restart.
Some sort of algorithm interpreted keywords as you were verging into bad territory, even though, I mean,
Correct.
would a human being look at the details and say, well, this wasn't a problem?
You can submit a request for review, which basically comes back with an AI response that says, yeah, too bad.
Oh, wow.
You're never talking to anybody.
Okay.
It's a known thing.
Well, TikTok, I salute you for even trying that. I have a TikTok account now. I don't feel like I'm a TikTok native. It's something I thought, I make little 30, 40-second funny songs now with little video bits. There's no downside to saying I'm going to put some on TikTok. And maybe if I do 100, maybe I'll start to catch on. And that's about what it is. Some of them get some nice comments and likes and views and all that, but I don't feel like I'm fluent in TikTok.
No, and in all honesty, the only thing that bothered me is it stole the voice of so many guests that have been on this show that showed their strength and vulnerability. That they came on here for other people to so they could learn from them, so they could use them as a lighthouse. And then all that just got squashed at the, just one button. And there we were starting over again. At the end of the day, though, I get a chance to recycle all of the videos that we've had and with the knowledge of what was the best. And I get to approach our TikTok now with a different mindset than I would have had 4 or 5 years ago. Right. So it's kind of like cleaning it out. You got to clean out the cupboards or whatever periodically and get rid of that, Riddler plastic cup that's in there from McDonald's that's behind the glasses. You got to throw that shit away periodically, and you put out some new stuff with better ideas, fresher, approaches to it. It's something that I think we're all swimming through. I mean, it's the slot machine between heaven and hell, right? You spin that thing and you don't know which one you're going to land on. Is it funny? Is it sad? Is it, the end of the world? What's on your feed next as you're scrolling through there?
Yeah. If you don't get to keep pulling the handle, though, and you're stuck with your one try, I feel like so many creative things have to be a volume business. Don't get hung up on the fate or the reception of any particular song or any particular video, because algorithms and mysterious taste, you just have no idea what's really going to catch on. So just keep doing things because you love them. I'm sorry to hear that your archive got wiped out, but hopefully you can.
Well, that's the upside to having multiple social medias accounts. We have YouTube, we have Instagram, and we have folders full of all this stuff because I have OCD and don't throw things away. So they're all there. It's just a matter of redoing it all.
Yeah.
My ADHD does not like that either. That's a repetitive task that I'm not going to be good with.
So see here. You're doing music as well, right? Because
that is correct.
From what I've read about.
I started producing music about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was all born of this show. I was putting together all of the contents for a regular episode. You had to have your intro, had to have your outro, had to have your bumpers, had to have all that cookie cutter shit, right? I knew what I wanted, and I thought I could articulate it well, and I was not part of the creative world yet. I had not believed in myself yet. So I was looking for other people to provide me what my vision was. And let me tell you, I got some Fiverr hot shit. I got some of the worst stuff and some of the most creative stuff, right? And in between, but none of it was mine.
Mm-hmm.
None of it was what I was trying to convey. And so I sat down. I was like, all right, how the hell do they do it? What is it that everybody else does to make music happen now? I said, all right, let me just open up GarageBand, right? And take a look at it. What is this? Oh, it's music Legos. Okay, I can get down with this. Let's play music Legos for a while.
That's a good way to put it.
And you start playing with it, and you start playing with it, and then you start to realize, hey, wait a minute. I have an ear for music that never, ever had the chance to be exploited in any way, shape, or form. When you grow up with parents on drugs in the middle of, Okeechobee, Florida, the closest thing to an instrument that you get is a fucking recorder that your stepdad wants to shove up your ass, right? You're not going to get a saxophone, not like that way. I mean, for playing the recorder too much. I saw your eyebrows raised. You're like, that just took a left turn really fast.
Yeah, we
No,
got
I mean,
a
like
glimpse
every
of
parent wants to kill somebody, for playing that recorder. So what I'm saying is I had never had the opportunity to exploit any of those talents. I didn't know I had them, sat down, found out that it was something that really, that's the one place outside of meditation that I lose time.
Yeah.
I completely lose time. I can sit with about 500 to 1,000 hi-hats all in a row and just sit there with one repetitive sound in my background and just hitting each one until I find which one exactly fits into that particular track. And I will do it for hours until my wife comes in and throws a bucket of water on me and is like, the hell is wrong with you? And I realize I haven't peed in 6 hours. I haven't drank water. I haven't done anything. And that was one of the pillars of how I began this journey of mental health, healing, and helping other people. Was that really opened up a gateway for me to be able to go and express myself even more and gain self-confidence. Because when I first started making those music tracks, my belief was that they sucked. I went to my wife and I was like, take a listen to this. This can't be good. Like, it's not supposed to be, not saying easy, but easy. I'd never had a talent, right, that was actually mine. It wasn't something I had to go sit down. There was a certain amount of it that existed, before I started. So it was amazing to me to watch that unfold. And I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the artistic expression, the way I could get lost in, a set of music that was dedicated to one of our guests. Like, I would try to feel what it is that they felt when they went through that and put that into some kind of audio experience. Like, one of the tracks that I released is called Iden. Iden is a transgender woman that was a paramedic, firefighter, and several other emergency services roles, but lost their position due to bigotry, and they were pushed out and ended up finding out that they were one of the best dark artists that I've ever seen. Has had numerous shows now that are all her collage work for some of the most thought-provoking pictures you could ever imagine, from sketch over to collage, and no two pieces are the same, but you could feel with everyone you were looking at, all that pain, all that love, all of these things just boom, hit the paper, right? And you have to sit when I do feel a connection. So when I have the time, I want to make these tracks. And sitting down with that one, I was bullied as transgender as a kid for a window because I had gynecomastia in a hillbilly town. It's not a good combo, right? So Iden really meant something to me, because while I don't have that experience, I know what it's like to be told I'm someone I'm not, right? And that meant something to me. And those tracks are where I got to express that, to show them that I felt what they were saying. They felt heard, if that makes sense. But that track is straight up grindhouse. Sounds like something that Quentin Tarantino would put in the opening of Kill Bill, right? But it matches the aesthetic, and it's a place that I enjoy losing myself in that time frame of just putting together those tracks, grabbing violins, grabbing cymbals, grabbing clarinets, grabbing whatever it is, and bringing it all together so that it becomes a living, breathing entity that they can look at and see that they were appreciated, that they were heard, right? Because the show's not about me. I talk a lot and I say a lot of shit about what I'm doing, but the show is about them. The show is about you. The show is about a platform where people like yourself can come in and share what it is that you've done, where you've been, because that is a lighthouse opportunity. People are going to look to you and they're going to say, this guy always does it this way. That's what a lighthouse is. It's someone that gets up, acts authentically, and repeats, because then other people get the license to be themselves, right? When they see other people doing it, they get to do it, right? But it's not the Tragedy Academy without asking, was there a crossroads where all of this felt like it was going to go away or never happen again or never even happen?
I was thinking about to what degree we would want to talk about tragedy. And I have to say, I've been quite lucky in my life. The tragedies such as I have had have rarely intersected with the creative things I'm doing. Although I will say there's one song on Broken Heart Insurance that's the least funny one, the one called When I Say Hello. That's about somebody who's in love who can't tell their beloved anything about it just because the situation they're both in, this conversation can't happen.
Is that a real situation for you?
That was a real situation. That was one of those instances where the song largely poured out in a moment of just anguish.
Isn't it amazing how that happens?
That does happen. And that was a revelation to me also to realize. So many of the songs I've loved throughout my life, have they been prompted by moments of anguish? Yes. Not all of them. Sometimes it's just the Beatles saying, all right, we need to write 4 more songs to fill up the album.
Fucking Yellow Submarine, here we go.
Yeah, which is fine. But sometimes the artists we love have really grappled with some big problematic feeling and made art out of it. And that was a bit of a reminder I needed to have, because, now I do that. I guess that's what people do. And that's not to say that most of my music or film or art is spawned by anguish. I think I have mostly a comedic engine that's fired by absurdity and cheerful weirdness. But occasionally, yes, there's been.
I would say that could be a trauma wax, right? Trauma could beat up off of somebody that thrives within comedy, satire, looking at things the opposite way a little bit. You could feel like maybe you're able to navigate those situations with a little more ease. But I heard a term before, it was called trauma shaming, right? And it was super weird to me to hear that. I needed it explained. And what it was is that somebody would impose upon another that they didn't necessarily have the level of trauma that they did, so they shouldn't feel that way.
All right. Right? Competition about who's got it worse.
Yeah. Correct. And I've seen people say, much like yourself, you were saying, well, I haven't been through certain things, or they haven't intersected and things like that. But I believe that experiences are like prescription lenses, right? They're not going to be the same for 2 people, but they will change their views, right? And I think that when we go through things, whether or not they're traumatic at this level or traumatic at this level, they still get a value that changes perspective every time, right? And it's also the lenses that you look back through, or you take everything through from your position. And I love that you're not saying that you've been down, you've been hammered by everybody, and you've probably seen the list of guests that have been on here that have all these traumas. And I would be intimidated to even say anything, but I would argue that every position that you're put in should get as much weight or merit, despite what other people may think about the level of pain that could have come from it, because pain is all relative, right? If I have a kid that gets slapped every day, he's not going to give 2 shits about slap 52, right? It's not really going to change the scenario too much. But if I only slap my kid once and I do it and say, remember this for the rest of your life, right? And I make it a whole thing, it could be just as traumatic or maybe even worse. Who knows, right?
I have one song on the album called Fitted Sheet, which was inspired by the least important, tiniest trauma that human beings can face, which is the conundrum of how do you fold the fitted sheet when you've got it out of the dryer. And so that came out of a real experience, and it's a funny song as it goes along. You can't fold it, and then you put it on the bed, and no, wrong corner, and it's inside out, and all that. And that's funny for a while. Then, and I didn't really even see this coming when I started writing that song. It takes a somewhat unexpected left turn into sort of dark philosophy of, maybe we need to be okay with the imperfections of fitted sheets as a larger message about life is just going to be hard and messy, and just don't sweat the corners of the fitted sheet too much.
So I would argue that you may have found your calling in music and writing combined in a manner that you might be able to give back even more, just because you're allowing people to see your authenticity and you're speaking about difficult things while giving a comedic spin to it. And you have a philosophy about music and comedy. Is that correct?
They are definitely intersecting. I like to say how the years of the Letterman Show, thinking of bits and writing economically, that was like in Karate Kid, the wax on, wax off skills I was building, not knowing that songwriting can partake of a lot of the same rules, or at least instincts of have a good idea, hopefully a good idea that has some premise, some possibilities to the premise, develop it for a few verses or beats, and then figure out, is it time to go? We got to get out before people are tired of this. Have a way to get out before you've overstayed your welcome. So that was true in comedy, and it's also, I think, true in songwriting. You have a good idea that will sustain for these number of beats, and then it's time to go.
I would concur with that. You can overstay your welcome in a track with one instrument. Like it's a real thing. It's one of my chief complaints about music now, because it can be very repetitive sounds over and over that are very little differentiation between the two. That and everybody's singing through a fucking vuvuzela now. Like that thing that, that thing at like soccer games.
Yeah, I've missed this trend.
I feel like when they're singing, it's like, it's so auto-tuned that they might as well be holding one of those to a microphone, right? So we're rounding up probably over an hour now. I think, we are. I do have one thing that I wanted to show you before we're done. And I have an album that I think is effing hysterical that my dad gave to me in 1976. And I pulled it and uploaded it here to our system. I'm just looking for the video itself, and I'm going to share it with you because I need your thoughts on this.
Oh boy, I wonder if it's an oddity I'll have actually encountered somewhere.
I firmly believe that you at least have heard of it.
Okay.
It's pretty famous.
All right, the chances are good.
Not, and it was the most hysterical thing to me as a kid because it was just so ridiculous, especially as an adult now. So this is Ali and his gang versus Mr. Tooth Decay.
Who knocked the crack in the Liberty Bell? Ali. Who really gave that bell a smack? Ali. Who punched it so hard that the bell did crack? Hit it so hard with an awful whack. Ali.
So this whole thing is...
Every summer we look proper things to do. Now listen, this is very important. This is
So,
not just
so the whole thing is Ali and this group of kids, Muhammad Ali, fighting Mr. Tooth Decay. And there are actual cameos. Of course, one of his, beloved friends and enemies, Howard Cosell, is in there,
Right.
doing his thing. But at the same time, there was Frank Sinatra was
Frank
in it.
Sinatra. Is Jimmy Carter in it?
It makes me laugh so hard every time I even look at the cover of this thing.
I recognize that immediately. That is classic Dave's record collection material right there.
Oh, thank God. It makes me feel good. I picked something that was worthwhile to share with a legend like yourself.
Did it encourage you to take good care of your teeth? Did it have its actual intended effect?
It did, until that little red pill shamed the shit out of me. Do you remember?
Oh, the thing you'd brush your teeth and it would show you where you weren't brushing very well. Yeah. And it would leave a red. In front of your classmates. Yeah.
And I lived on a farm with well water and no fluoride and all that kind of stuff. And all I remember is them giving me that stupid red pill, chewing it with everybody else, and looking like I blew the Kool-Aid man. Like I was fucked.
Yeah,
I was like, this is not good. Being laughed at. Ew, your teeth are dirty. And
I do remember those. And no matter how careful a toothbrush you were, it was going to prove that you were not getting all the corners.
I never saw a teacher chew one.
No.
They weren't going to put themselves on
that was
the
back
line,
in that teacher lounge after school. You guys want to do some red pills?
That's some red. Red number 8.
Yeah.
It really kicks hard.
Well, I'm sorry about this dental trauma, but I hope that Muhammad Ali and his gang
they did. He fought Mr. Tooth Decay in the end of the album and came out successful.
What kind of character is Mr. Tooth Decay? Is that his actual given name on his birth certificate? I'm Jeffrey Tooth Decay. What? It's not weird. It's just my name.
What's he go by?
Yeah.
He's got to have a nickname.
Yeah. Friends just call him
Mr. T is taken.
Yeah.
So you can use that one. He looks like Gargamel on the cover. He looks like Gargamel. So it's all hunched over, wearing some. I mean, Tooth Decay can't look, handsome. Could you imagine handsome Tooth Decay?
That would be very postmodern now. A character that is complicated. He's dark and light. You identify with the anti-hero, Tooth Decay. He's been through a lot. You don't know what he's been through.
You don't understand what it's like to be decayed.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think Hollywood must be very close to having a Mr. Tooth Decay movie. They're running out of IP.
Oh, man, it's got to happen.
Yeah.
Got to happen. Hey, Steve, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and being so cool and allowing me to geek out for a little while and listen to, something that I've been a fan of for so long. And I did get to go to Letterman once.
Okay.
And I didn't have the best people on that day, except for the comedian Tom Papa, which I love Tom Papa. He's a great comedian. But the other was Nicole Richie. So
took me a minute to summon that name from a dusty back shelf of my mind there. Okay, yes, that's a very 20 years ago name.
But I got back there because when they did the interview, I told them how much I loved, first of all, the Oprah read. And then the other was I absolutely loved anytime Jack Hanna come on. Anytime he came on, it was unhinged and I loved it.
Yeah, that was a favorite of mine as well. Yeah, well, thanks for having me on to talk about all the mysteries of life. And I appreciate what you're doing and finding people to help inspire people who need a little reminder that you don't need permission from some big corporation or multinational conglomerate or anybody who's a gatekeeper. You can start doing your own stuff and find your way with it. And you have no idea when it'll happen, but nothing will happen. You don't try to make something.
Leaving potential on the table. Tell everybody your website where they can find your stuff.
Oh, yes. SteveYoungWorld.com is my general website. SteveYoungMusic.hearnow.com is a jumping off point for the album, where you can find it on Spotify and Apple and Amazon and all the rest. I do have a YouTube channel, also Steve Young World, where I'm starting to put out some music videos.
I subscribed today.
Oh, good. Oh, it's that's a 80% increase in my subscription rate already.
We've all been there, man.
Yeah.
But you know what? The organic grabs are the best. Fans are the ones you want. You don't just want people trampling through. I liked it. As soon as I heard the first one, but I also like stupid stuff like back when, who was it? The one that just passed away. He did a lot of vulgar guitar playing. Bob Saget.
Oh,
right.
Oh, yeah,
his music always made me laugh because it was just so off the off the hinges. So I'm a fan of the comedy music. So you did a great job. And again, you're welcome back anytime. Remember, everybody, be cool and keep learning. Just 1 second.
And brush your teeth.
And brush your teeth, or Muhammad Ali will kick your ass.
That's right.